Hi, welcome to my studio. My name's Kris. I've got apples, and more apples. In this video, I'm going to paint this apple 3 times on different types of watercolor paper to show the difference. I've got Arches, 140-pound cold press, 100% cotton. I have Canson watercolor paper. This is not cotton paper. And finally, I have a sketchbook. So let's take a look at all this paper. The type of watercolor paper you use for your paintings makes a big difference in the results that you will get. Many people suggest that the type of paper you use is actually more important than the paints or the brushes that you use. And I tend to agree. So I decided to do an experiment. I decided that I would paint the same subject, an apple, 3 different times on 3 different types of paper. The first paper is Arches. This is a 140-pound, 100% cotton paper, cold press. Cold press means it has a slight texture to it. This is the most common paper that I use in my studio. The second paper is by Canson, Canson XL. And this is also a watercolor paper. It's also 140 pound. It's also cold pressed. But the big difference between this and the Arches is that this is not 100% cotton. In fact, it's a cellulose or wood pulp based paper. Now, as you're going to see in my results in a little bit, you can get decent results with this kind of paper. It is made for watercolor and it's less expensive than the Arches. However, especially for beginners, you're going to see that it's a lot harder to control your watercolor on this kind of paper on a non-cotton paper than it is, in my opinion, on a cotton paper. And the third paper I decided to use is actually this sketchbook. This is a Stillman and Byrne Epsilon series sketchbook for artists. It's not really watercolor paper, it's a sketchbook for all kinds of different sketching and pencil drawing and painting. And this is 90 pound instead of 140 pound. It's a little bit thinner and it's considered like a hot press. So it's got much more of a smooth texture to it. No texture really at all. It's very smooth paper. So what were the results of my little experiment? Well, here's the apple painted on 100% cotton Arches 140 pound paper. This is actually my favorite of the 3 paintings. I think, especially if you look in really close in the details of the painting, you're going to see there's a real depth to the colors. I glazed one color over the other, and you can really see through the colors. You can almost see a depth in the painting, and I think there's some really beautiful mixing of the colors. And I think this is really possible because of the paper, the cotton paper, because of the way that it responds to the pigments, because of the way the pigments soak into the color, soak into the paper, and just the results that you get, I think, are a much richer result. Here's the second painting I did. This is on Canson XL, also 140 pound, but this is the cellulose or wood pulp paper. You'll notice in a little bit when I show you the actual painting process that this is, I think, much harder to get soft edges. So as you can see here, there's a lot of places where there's really hard edges and where the edges didn't blend as well as they did in the Arches. I was trying to use the same technique throughout in the paintings and get the same look to the paintings, but I really had a hard time getting soft edges, get blending the way I did with the Arches. Now, the funny thing is I asked a bunch of people on Facebook, in a Facebook watercolor painting group, which of the 2 they liked. A lot of people actually liked this painting here on the Canson more than they liked this one. I think it's a little bit of trying to compare apples to apples, no pun intended, or apples to oranges, because the way I painted them is really different. I think some people liked this painting more because it really nothing to do with what I was trying to test, which was the paper and the quality of the paper and the way that it absorbed the paint. It was really just because they liked the style a little bit differently. As the artist, I really preferred painting on this paper, the arches, more than I liked painting on the Canson pulp paper. However, having said that, I actually was pleased with the results I was able to get on the Canson paper. I think that this apple turned out pretty good. I'd have to agree with my friends on Facebook. I think it turned out pretty good. But I really had to change up my techniques a little bit. I had to adjust to the way the paper was responding to the paint, to the water. I had to really work a little harder to get some of the blending to happen and things like that. So, having said that, I think one thing to keep in mind is if you are a beginner in watercolor and you're just learning your techniques and therefore have a harder time adjusting your techniques, I think that painting on 100% cotton paper, which is a little bit more consistent, a little bit maybe even more forgiving to your techniques, is not a bad idea. Arches and all cotton papers cost more. It's just plain and simple. They cost more, they're more expensive. However, I think that you overall can get much better and more consistent results using cotton paper. Oh yeah, so here's the results on this little sketchbook. This is the Stillman & Burn 90-pound hot press paper. And again, when you look at the painting process here in a second, you're going to see that I had a much harder time getting the results I wanted with this. Very much really difficult to control the paint. Got a lot of what are called blooms, where the paper or the water, as you put it down on the paper, just kind of blooms out and does all kinds of crazy stuff that you didn't want it to do. And it was just a lot harder to get the results. No one, hardly anyone I should say, in my Facebook group liked this painting over the other two. Almost everybody liked those first two paintings, not so much this one. This is on the poorest or lowest quality paper, not really made for watercolor. 90 pounds instead of 140 pounds. And hot press, which I don't like painting on hot press as much, which is really smooth paper. I prefer a little bit of texture. So for all those reasons, I did not really like the results on this sketchbook, Stillman & Burn hot press. Okay, so here they are, all three paintings side by side. This is on Arches cotton paper, this is on Canson non-cotton paper, and this is on also non-cotton 90-pound sketchbook hot press paper. And again, I really like this one the most, but you can be the judge which you like. I think you can get good results on something like Canson, which is not cotton. It's a lot less expensive, but maybe harder to control. Probably wouldn't go for any kind of paper that's not specifically made for watercolor. And these kinds of sketchbooks, many of them are just more multimedia applications. They're not really necessarily made for watercolor. So that's the outcome of my little experiment. In this next section, I'm just going to show you a time-lapse painting of me painting these three pictures of an apple. And you can just see how the water and how the paint respond to the different types of paper. Hope you enjoy it. Hey, did you enjoy this video? Did you find it helpful comparing three different types of paper? If so, please consider subscribing to my channel. I put out videos like this about once a week. If you could also hit that like button, that'll help me out a lot. Thanks. Have a great day.